There's an announcement that there's Braille Uno now.
What?
Braille Uno, the card game Uno.
Really?
Yeah, so it's Braille Uno now.
I hate that game.
I don't think I've ever played it.
This is the AT Banter podcast, a balanced and entertaining look at assistive technology, accessibility, and its importance in people's lives. Join Rob Minot, Ryan Fleury, and Steve Barclay as they banter with people around the world about anything and everything regarding assistive technology and the disability community. Now, on with the show.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of AT Banter.
Banter.
What was that, Ron?
That was an extra banter.
That was the echo.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, that's enthusiasm there, man.
This recording remotely is a little bit of a challenge when we can't take like visual cues from each other.
That's more fun this way.
Well, yeah, Ryan doesn't care.
That's
true.
Screw you and your visual cues.
I haven't had visual cues in 24 years.
Where are we? We're not together, obviously.
Nope.
We're avoiding the plague carrier.
That's right.
Yes. Mr. Fleury is down with a bug, it sounds like.
Yeah, I'm not down yet. Just a bit of the sniffles and itchy throat.
Well, listen, we appreciate you giving us the heads up.
Well, I thought about it. I was like, well, should I bring... No, let's be nice.
We could always come with HEPA masks on or something.
That's true.
I don't
keep
know.
a spare set around.
Yeah.
Our dungeon is a highly enclosed space.
That's right. The secret lair.
I feel like germs would travel real well down there.
Yeah.
Well, now you can also cook them because there's a fireplace.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. So wait, really? Wait, is that what you guys were doing yesterday? You're installing a fireplace in the guitar dungeon?
Yeah, a friend of mine was giving away an electric fireplace. So it's electric fireplace that also has some vents on it, so it puts out heat. And
oh, no way.
yeah, so the basement gets fairly cool in the wintertime because there's only one air duct in the ceiling for the whole basement here. So I thought, well, let's get ourselves an electric fireplace and we can supplement the heat with it. So
well, that means during the Halloween show we can have like a fire going.
Yep. We can have the Google Home playing crackling fire sounds, or
I love it.
Yep.
Cool.
We can have it playing spooky music, whatever we want.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm working on some ideas.
Excellent.
Still, I'll talk to you a little bit later about it. But
perfect.
I did a little bit of brainstorming last night.
You and your cat.
Terrible ideas, but one of these will work.
Good.
Hey Ryan.
Rob.
What are we doing today?
Today we are talking with Elizabeth Specht and Jeanne Morton from the Cerebral Palsy Association of British Columbia.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's one of those I've had on the list for a while to get on the show because I don't know about you guys, but I don't even know what cerebral palsy is and what causes it. So I was interested to get somebody on. Yeah,
I think this will be excellent. And I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, that World CP Day is coming up next week.
It is indeed on October 6th.
Yeah, so good timing, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Look at you.
Plans coming together.
Excellent.
All right. Let's talk about Alexa, shall we?
Alrighty.
Not
Alexis?
No.
We were just
not Alexis, but Alexa.
Okay, no. You're going to trigger it every time you say the A word.
Oh, get over it, A. Deal with it. Yes. Did you hear about this new feature that they unveiled last week?
Yeah, for their new Amazon Echo Show device called Show and Tell.
All right. Well, tell us a little bit about it, Ryan. What can it do?
Well, from my understanding, if you are blind or visually impaired, you can point an object like a can at it, and it will tell you what that object is.
So this is pretty cool, although I'm skeptical on how well that could possibly work.
Well, I'm not, because, think of Amazon's database. They own Whole Foods. So, the object recognition in and of itself has been around for a long time.
That's true.
So this is nothing new.
Well, let's take a little dig into the. So last week, they unveiled a new show and tell feature that allows users to hold an item in front of an Echo Show and ask, "What am I holding?" Using computer vision and machine learning for object recognition, the device will respond with its best guess. So again, this is that machine learning that we've been hearing about for 2 years now at work, and clearly it's gotten to the point where it's good enough where they feel pretty comfortable in baking it right into the show. Now the show, Ryan, what do you know about this particular device? Is it obviously it has a screen and a camera?
Yeah, I believe this one is an 8-inch screen. I think the previous generation was a 5-inch, but yeah, this is 8-inch, I believe, and has the camera, and that's about all I know about it. So think of your Echo Dot, but with a screen on it. This
is really interesting because I feel like we just talked last week about Apple and all the new accessibility features in iOS 13.
Boo.
Amazon had... What do you mean, boo?
Well, last week they released iOS 13. A couple days later, 13.1. A couple days later, 13.11. And yesterday, 13.2.
Okay.
So they're becoming the Microsoft of the...
Oh, no.
When it comes to quality control, Apple has lost it on this update.
Really?
They've never done this before.
Well, listen, I guess it's going around. I mean, because listen, the last 2 years has not been good for Microsoft in that sense either. But I mean, and I can't believe I'm the one jumping to Apple's defense. But I mean, this is also this is a brand spanking new operating system. Yeah. So it's going to be, of course, they're going to have these incremental updates being rolled out in the weeks that follow because. It's hard to squash every single bug, I'm sure, before they release. So, I'll give Apple a little bit of slack on that one.
A little bit of slack?
A little bit of slack.
All right.
So I bet you it wasn't, bricking anybody's iPhone. So unlike that Windows update that they released where it's like, oh, yeah, actually.
Well, you saw that's rolled out to everybody now, eh? It's general availability now.
To what is?
1903, Windows 10 1903.
Oh, don't even...
And the next one's coming out soon.
Right.
19H2. Woohoo!
You're such a nerd, Ryan.
Hey, it pays the bills.
Yeah. Really? I got to get on that thing. Hey, so...
So back to Amazon.
Yeah, back to Amazon. So, well, yeah, this is interesting because I feel like it's Google's turn now. Like, show us what you got, Google. Let's give us something here, because it seems like all three of them are sort of rolling out different new accessibility features with the different devices, and then they all respond to each other by incorporating the other guy's accessibility feature into theirs, and it just makes accessibility on all these different platforms better and better. So I'm always excited to see new stuff coming out.
Well, I think Amazon released 15 or 20 new products in this announcement last week, and I don't think we'll see anything from Google till I/O next year.
Yeah, most likely. But I mean, that they're working on it. Yeah, these guys all respond to each other.
Yeah.
So when Amazon rolls this stuff out, Google is certainly behind the scenes looking at that, and they know that they need to respond in kind. So, and all that means is that all that competition, it means it's makes it better for the consumer. So, but that's pretty cool. Do you ever plan on getting one of those shows, Ryan?
No.
You would never get anything with a screen?
No, I don't need something with a screen. There's already enough creepiness factor of it always listening to you. Now that it's going to be watching you. So, no.
But it also leads me to believe that there's got to be some apps that are kind of, like, if they have this machine learning that good that the show can do this, there's got to be apps either already here or on the horizon that would allow you to do the same thing using...
Well, there are. Google's got their Lookout app, their Seeing AI app, so there is stuff that'll, do object recognition already on your smartphone. And that's just going to get better and better using AI.
Yep. Interesting. All right. Hey, I have one other thing to talk a little bit about. This is the big week of the the Domino's lawsuit.
Yeah, going to the Supreme Court.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this
About
is,
the
in fact...
accessibility of their website.
That's right. So there's a lot of eyes on this this week. So for anybody who is listening who may be not familiar with what we're talking about, there's been a lawsuit in the works for a few years now of a guy that has been suing Domino's for the fact that their app and their website isn't fully accessible. And it went to the courts, and the courts ruled in his favor, and now Domino's has taken the next step and is appealing to the Supreme Court to look at the case.
Their argument is that the ADA in the States only applies to physical access of locations, doesn't have anything to do with websites.
Right.
That's right.
And Domino's isn't saying that it's a financial thing. It sounds like they're more than willing to do it if it falls on that side. But like Steve says, they're trying to clarify what that ADA specifies.
Yeah, so they would rather spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on lawyers than they would to just simply make their stuff accessible.
Right.
Which I think still is a dick move, and I think everybody should boycott Domino's.
It is. Yeah.
Well, it absolutely is. And this is why there's a lot of eyes on it, and this is why it's so important.
Well, it said accessibility back decades. If websites
web accessibility, certainly.
ADA, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's going to be real interesting to see where the Supreme Court lands on this. And it's a little bit shocking. This isn't even a conspiracy theory. This is just a fact that there are a lot of companies that are watching this that are fully behind Domino's, that are supporting Domino's in this sense, because this can mean the difference to really impacting the bottom line of a lot of companies if they aren't required to build in accessibility into their online offerings.
I don't see how that's true at all. It is honestly minimal effort to make a website accessible. You just have to follow some standards.
They talk about an estimate of what it would cost Domino's to actually make their everything accessible, and it was like something like $38,000. And then they listed how many billions that Domino's made. Like, honestly, it's ridiculous. It's not a cost thing. I mean, it does baffle me. It even baffles me on a business level on why Domino's did this, because you're absolutely right. They've spent much more than that fighting this and continuing to fight it. So it can't be.
Are they trying to argue that it's a moral issue?
I don't know. I think that there's a consortium of businesses out there that are just like, okay, Domino's, like you go fight this battle. We'll support you. Like we're kind of behind you in the shadows, because it's going to set precedent. If Domino's, if this gets overturned in Domino's favor, that has an impact on a lot of other companies as well, because they can go, okay, well, we can do the bare minimum accessibility wise online. And we don't have to worry about making our websites and our apps compliant. I mean, it makes no sense to me, because
there's a simple solution. Very simple solution.
What's that?
If you find a website that's not accessible, screw them. Go to companies that are. I don't know how many times I've gone to websites that, and I'm fairly tech savvy, I like to think, that, there may be unlabeled buttons or graphics or, a play pause button's not labeled properly. Depending on what it is I'm looking for, I will go elsewhere. They're not, for example, Domino's isn't the only pizza chain in town. So give somebody else your business who's going to be there for you.
Yep. Yeah, well...
preferably one that makes better pizza.
Well, yeah.
Well, listen, I mean, it's never made sense to me from a business point of view. And that's where, I guess it's these old school guys that they just don't think that people who are visually impaired are going to buy pizza. Like it's ridiculous to me from a business cases. Why are you shutting out an entire demographic for, say, a $38,000 investment? You're just going to shut out an entire demographic because you just think, they're not going to use the service anyways. Like that's ludicrous.
Well, on the downside too, even if this falls on Domino's side, this is going to be in appeals for a long time. Nobody's just going to roll over and give up on this. NFBs, ACBs, they're going to fight
Supreme
this.
Court. You go to the Supreme Court, that's done.
You're done. Yeah.
It's over.
There's no appeal, nothing.
No, not to the Supreme
Yeah,
Court.
you can't go any higher than that.
Yeah.
Right. The appellate court, sided, with the individual. So, Domino's is going there to try to get that overturned. This is their last ditch effort, right?
Yeah, the only option this guy has, if the Supreme Court rules against it, is to go back to Congress and get the law changed.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, honestly, if there's that much ambiguity, in the ADA, yeah, fix it. Then fix it. Yeah. Like, it's shocking to me that we're still fighting over web accessibility, in 2019. The article makes such a good point that, now more than ever, apps and websites, you almost can't get away from needing to use them in some capacity. Yeah. So it's ridiculous that you're gonna shut people with disabilities out of those by not making them accessible. I mean, we just need those to be accessible now more than ever. I mean, it was one thing in 2001 when we were fighting this, big deal, it was still a big deal, but I just mean, like, you didn't do all your banking necessarily all through, online. And these days, there are literally places that are just like, no, you have to go through an app or you have to go through our website in order to, change your account or do whatever. So, yeah, this needs to be addressed. And
well, the other thing we've talked about a little bit, because this isn't the first time we've talked about this story, is this gentleman's experience using the app or the website. I haven't looked at the app or the website, but what wasn't accessible? Like, that's never been defined. All we've heard is it wasn't accessible. So why couldn't he access the app? Why couldn't he access the website? What were the problems with it? That's never been released.
Well,
get him on the show.
Yeah, I might have to.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure the information is out there. It's just that it's just that the news outlets, they don't talk about that. They don't dig deep enough into it, because most people don't even know what a screen reader is.
Right.
Let alone what about it, what part of the website the screen reader was unable to access. So.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. Like, we've seen nothing from the NFB, which I'm sure they're all over this. Same with ACB. I'm sure they're all over this. Like, this guy isn't on his own. I'm sure these blindness organizations are all over this.
Well, yeah. I mean, right now it's again, it's just a waiting game. So I'm sure we'll.
Well, we should know. We should know soon. I think, isn't it going before them pretty quick?
I think it's today, actually. So, we can probably give people an update next week. But again, I would say that keep your eye on the news and see how this lands, because precedent is a big deal, and this could really impact web accessibility going forward. Hey, Steve, why don't you tell the fine folks about Canadian Assistive Technology?
Well, Canadian Assistive Technology is a Canadian-based distributor of, guess what? Assistive technology.
I would not have guessed that.
Really? Oh, I got to work something better into the name then. And we do all kinds of low vision and blindness aids, as well as all kinds of physical access aids and accessible furniture. You name it. Visit our website at www.canastech.com.
Rick, let me ask you about this. Chaos Technical Services.
Chaos Technical Services.
Don't sound so excited about it. Woo! Speaking of repairs.
We are the sister company to Canastech. We do the repairs on low vision devices, reading machines, for libraries, braille printers, and pretty well anything in between. We can be found at www.chaostechnicalservices.com.
Joining us now are Elizabeth Specht and Jeanne Morton from the Cerebral Palsy Association of British Columbia.
Thank you again for taking some time out to talk to us a little bit about the organization. So why don't we just start with that and give us a little bit of a snapshot of the organization itself, what you guys do, and sort of what the mission statement is.
A very traditional, historical nonprofit organization, mid-50s, group of parents with the medical profession, group of parents with children with CP, realized there needed to be a convening of the medical profession and families to start talking about cerebral palsy, how could it be best be advocated for with a single provincial voice, etc., rather than in silos all over the province. So really, since mid-50s, this organization has been going. It's been going through an up and a down journey, because as the political platform changes, funding changes as well. Yet the organization has always seen its way through staying focused on being a voice for, a resource for, and a support for those with cerebral palsy, whether you're a family with children, whether you're a youth, whether you're an adult, or, now we're seeing our first sort of grouping of the older adult out in the community with cerebral palsy. So we are a provincial organization. We are that resource center, so that if you receive a diagnosis or information, we're the place that you can call, and somebody with lived experience will answer the phone to help you navigate the journey of, where is some help available, what support is available, who do I talk to, what programs may we have that are applicable for the particular person calling. So we are that resource. We're also a center that provides assistance to those with cerebral palsy. And while we're not the government funding, we're the community support to that. Because if you are diagnosed with cerebral palsy, you qualify for some government funding, disability assistance. But through our organization, cerebral palsy is a very, very expensive disability. A lot of people don't understand that, or don't understand cerebral palsy, period. But there is so much that is needed by way of adapted equipment, be it for communicating, for mobility. So we raise funds to be able to provide grants out for assistance. We also raise funds to provide bursaries for the post-secondary student to attend post-secondary institutions and pursue their education. And we also provide camperships in the summertime that allow kids and adults to attend one of several accessible camps that accommodate individuals with cerebral palsy. Having said all that, our tagline is, creating a life without limits, and doing everything that we can to provide that life without limits for those with cerebral palsy or other disabilities. And we also run our own programs and services. We have a youth support group. At times, we have a seniors tea and tango or tea and crumpets group. We have adapted dance programs. We have adapted yoga programs. So much of it, though, is dependent on funding, of course, like any nonprofit organization. We're not an organization that has predictable funding, a one-stream source. So while we don't like to change up what we do, sometimes we have to lessen what we do, but our goal is to continue to increase and expand as much as feasible throughout the province, because there's people with CB all around the province, not just in the Lower Mainland.
Yeah, in short, yeah, we're trying to help people with cerebral palsy find full participation in their community. Yeah. Maybe a little bit about CP itself. A lot of people think of it as a disease, which it is not. Cerebral palsy is the result of a one-time brain injury suffered around the time of birth. So that once that injury happens, it doesn't change. It's not progressive, but its effects can change over the lifetime. And like any, people tend to be familiar with an acquired brain injury. With CP, the effects can be just as varied, from very mild, like a weakness in one side, to very severe, causing severe mobility, speech-language difficulties, right across the spectrum. So one person's CP is not necessarily another. With the programs we're offering, we're finding our membership is gravitating more and more to peer support. The people want to have contact with others who have a similar lived experience with CP. They seem to be finding that to be the most helpful.
And just to cover a couple of other facts, it's the most common physical disability in childhood. Globally, although we're more so talking about, World CP Day is coming up, but globally there's over 17 million people with cerebral palsy. In BC, it's 10,000. 1 in 2 people with CP live in chronic pain. 1 in 3 people cannot walk. 1 in 5 cannot talk. 1 in 10 have a severe vision impairment. So as Jeanne said, there's varying degrees. And of all children with CP, 60% are born at term.
So it sounds like you guys sort of have a big challenge because really, you're supporting people through a variety of different age ranges. Does that make it a challenge? I mean, because it's obviously you're going to deal a lot with youth, but it sounds like you've also got an aging population as well that you're trying to support. So does it get kind of hard to spread all those resources around?
It does, and that's a very good point that you picked up on. And there are many organizations, in the Lower Mainland throughout the province. The Child Development Center, Sunny Hill Hospital, that we partner with. We can't do everything, and nor are we the medical support. But in partnership with those organizations, we can be the community support. And you are right that there is an increased demand for the aging, and by that I mean teens, young adults and seniors. And as Jeanne said, this just sincere desire to be supported and be connected with others, with CP in their age groups or as families. So we're seeing that as a real opportunity. And then the medical professions come to us we have a lot of resources, et cetera. And so they point, they direct individuals or families to us to pursue those resources or find out where some other resources can be. But there are a lot of young child serving organizations in this province as well.
Yeah, a big gap that what seems to hit everyone hard are the traditional transition points in life. So a very difficult time is reaching the age of majority. So a person who has had supports throughout childhood loses those supports and has to try to cobble together, they and their family at this point usually, cobble together enough resources to help keep them in the community. And then as aging hits, and with cerebral palsy, issues of aging can hit at pretty much any time in life. Like often the issues of aging hit earlier than they do within the general population. But we are seeing more and more people with CP becoming true seniors. And as they really are the first cohort. I mean, when these people were born, they were given a life expectancy of a maximum of 35 years. So one of the big issues around that is, of course, emotional. What does it mean that I've outlived my life expectancy? Also, these families really never expected for the children with CP to outlive their parents. So that puts another set of pressures on the family. And this is all brand new. If you look at the Canadian census, for people with CP over 65, it reports a question mark.
Now, in terms of the weight of some of the programs, though, that you guys offer, do you find that certain age ranges, it just pays to put the emphasis on it? So, for example, say youth, just because that's where the numbers are, but that's also where you can kind of do the most good in terms of building sense of community or empowerment or Anything else that you can sort of contribute?
I think the greatest, most concentrated need is the transition from children's services into adulthood. In terms of the incidence and prevalence of CP, it's remained constant. So we have, a fairly demographic, steady client base. Many disabilities are waning, but CP is associated with low birth rate, preterm birth, and multiple births. So the prevalence of IV in vitro fertilization and the survival rate of very young preemies has caused our numbers to remain fairly consistent. But I think the one place that hits everybody sort of simultaneously is the fact that all of the supports and funding and resources that they've received coming through school end at the age of 19, but their physical condition hasn't changed. And there is no easy step into adults. For example, there's no medical specialty for adults of doctors who deal with CP. You will find children's specialists who deal with CP, but not adults, because historically it's been considered a disorder of childhood, and quite honestly, that people didn't survive far into adulthood.
It sounds like there's a lot of pressure put on families to provide supports for their children with CP. What is there when families aren't able to provide those supports? Like what's out there that they can draw on to get more supports themselves?
Oh.
Good question.
Yeah, there's a combination of things because, there's a limit of what is provided for government support. And, I hear of, and again, we can provide some other organizations can provide some. It is, in my time learning and meeting the families around the province, it is an incredible effort on the parent's part or an individual's part to try to trace down where the resources are, if there are any that are applicable for them. And it's a very complicated, even ours, to apply for a camping bursary, complicated bureaucratic system to access resources that are so desperately needed with these families.
And that's part of where we start to see an association of poverty with disability. It costs more than $1 million to raise a child with cerebral palsy. And very often, at least one parent is going to be limited in their labor force participation because of the care needs of that child. That's almost to be expected. And then you add the costs for therapy and assistive equipment. Consider the cost of a wheelchair-equipped van, for basic transportation. For children, there are supports at home through the at-home program that provides therapy and some respite support for the parents. But again, it never seems to be quite sufficient.
I know of many families that have resorted to, running their own GoFundMe campaigns. Or there's a variety of other than just to support their children and their family life.
Right.
Yes, and have to turn to their community at large for help.
Yeah. So one of the things we're doing, and I don't know if one of the points that you were going to get to with us is, World CP Day is coming up, and a big part of our role right now, and we're so appreciative that you've asked us to do this, is raising the awareness, raising the knowledge level and the awareness in this province about CP and the needs and the requirements and the family stories, etc. And as you raise the awareness and start telling the stories, you start to be able to raise some resources as well. It's not easy, and it doesn't happen overnight. And we're also hoping that both through provincial and federal government that we may be able to advocate for some more predictable funding for our organization to be able to support families, but also on behalf of families with cerebral palsy. So we have a variety of things coming up over the next month. World CP Day is October the 6th. And we're calling it a Light It Up Green campaign, and you're going to start seeing the most significant monuments in the province are going to be lit up green on October the 6th, although BC Place will be October the 3rd. We couldn't get the 6th. We even have the BC Legislature lighting up green. We've got a couple of interviews like this, a radio interview. We've got some time on global TV because the awareness is so critical in getting the knowledge out there. And we're going to launch our first online campaign. I mean, this organization has, raised funds the hard way. As the grants become available, you asked a question, how do you determine which programs to do? Well, sometimes it's determined by which grant is available. And it's a hard way to run an organization. So we're going to attempt to streamline some fundraising and call it the Light It Up Green campaign. And there's no better time to launch that than during World CP Day.
Well, and I'm going to jump in here for a second. And we have an election coming up. Who should we vote for? Who's going to give us more funding?
Jeanne?
Well, I think what I would prefer is to say, can you please be asking the candidate who is going to give more? Because if we as an organization ask them, we'll get one answer. But if all 10,000 of our members, the families, and the other people who are aware are asking that of our politicians, that's where we would really hope to see real dollars happen.
And that's another piece of our work, is we're really trying to engage our members to be the voice so that, they are speaking out, and just like Jeanne said. And of course, as a nonprofit organization, we have to be very, very careful on any political stance. We work with whoever is in, and whoever is in, we work with trying to, advocate and try to secure that funding for a very, very critical and important need in our province, and one that is mostly misunderstood.
As well, I mean, when we're talking about the governing bodies, we're not only talking about who's going to give us money, but we're also looking for policies, procedures, and consultation with our community. The new Accessibility Act. Yeah. Right now, we have a member who is unable to speak. She is she has a degree. She uses synthetic voice. She is needing medical care and cannot get the health authorities to communicate with her directly through her needed and preferred method of communication, email. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff. There's a question of just the general public seeing somebody walking down the street with an unsteady gait and perhaps slurred speech, and they will typically assume substance impairment rather than something like cerebral palsy. So, there's quite a plethora of needs that we have.
Yeah, and I think too, with a bit of a push on British Columbia adopting some sort of accessibility act, as well as the Accessible Canada Act, that's only going to help everybody in all the disability arenas.
I agree.
Yes, and consultation is everything. The recent business in Vancouver with the plastics reduction, they failed initially to consult with the community to understand that a plastic bendy straw can be a matter of life and death for some people with disabilities. So it took quite a bit to get them to recognize this. But in the meantime, people with disabilities were being trolled for their need for these plastic straws. Right. So, the round table, the biggest lesson from that is the need to consult, and to consult thoroughly through the disability community. So we're not particularly speaking well for people with visual impairment. So it's got to have a good broad representation if we're to have true accessibility.
Absolutely.
What's the state of housing for adults if they need supported housing? What's out there these days? Because I have a friend who has CP, and he's in socialized housing right now, but it seems to be an utterly inappropriate setup for him. The walls all have holes in them now because he's driven his power chair into them on numerous occasions. He can't get any support for getting anything up off the floor. So anything that hits the floor pretty much stays there. Initially, when he went into the place, it was carpeted, and his chair chewed the heck out of the carpet, and it's never been replaced. It's just all torn up. It's not a very good living situation for him, but there doesn't appear to be anything better out there. Is there?
Well, when you raised the question of housing, I was about to ask, is that a rhetorical question? Because, everyone is struggling with housing, especially in the Lower Mainland. And when everyone is struggling, you can count on the disability community being even further stretched. And you're absolutely correct. It is appropriate housing is in very much short supply. And you've also alluded to another point in terms of the degree of assistance people can get within their homes. You say you can't pick something up off of the floor. And that has to do with the fact that there really is no adequate supports with housework for people who have a disability. There's a very complicated roundabout through the choices for supports and independent living, and that's kind of a long and detailed process. But a lot of people actually find themselves in risk just being unable to maintain their housing adequately because of those lack of supports. So yeah, it's a huge problem in every aspect.
But I would encourage a friend to contact us in regard to an assisted device for perhaps being able to access things that are on the floor.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. We talk to a lot of advocacy agencies, and what we're always hearing is that educational component, educating the general public about any given disability is so difficult, and just it needs to be done so badly, but it's just really difficult to penetrate the general public's psyche about it, because disability is one of those things that people generally don't want to think about until it actually affects them.
Well, I think we're going to start seeing a lot more because of the two things you alluded to, the BC accessibility and the new federal act. I think we're just going to see a lot more information, a lot more consultation, a lot more awareness building, because the demographic and the population of those with disabilities is going to grow as well, right? So I think we're going to just start seeing more and more of this. And, in our early conversations with potential funders or, corporate, I think there's a realization that the funding stream needs to be relooked at as well. I'm a big believer in collaboration and coordination, and I think that's part of it too. I mean, the more that our voices can be combined, I think the stronger the message out and the awareness building can be. But that's often easier said than done, because everybody's just trying to survive, basically.
Yes, and accessibility and inclusion will only beget increasing accessibility and inclusion. Really, the best answer is not Elizabeth and I lecturing the public about the needs of folks with disability. It's getting to know somebody who's living with a disability, knowing their story, and then you'll get to understand the person as a person, not as other, and not as something that, I would dread, just as a person. And that is ultimately what's going to be our best bet, that kind of networking.
Speaking of networking, I was going to ask, so you mentioned that you're having a lot of success in terms of some of the sort of the peer networking aspects of some of your programs. Could you sort of expand a little bit on that, and like what kind of peer programs do you have, and has things like social media really helped your case in that sense?
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. We run a youth group, and I sort of, with my hands here, I'm saying youth sort of in brackets, because what I love about it is anybody comes, right? And we'd never turn anybody away. So they're sort of all ages, and they come, and it's either just the other day we just had a picnic when the weather was still really good, or normally there's a speaker who comes in. We had somebody come in from Neil Squire Foundation Society, showing some adapted things that can be made in their labs there to help people. Just fascinating information. So, it can be educational, but it's got a real social component to it. And one of the things that we're going to start doing, and again, launching in this month of World CP Day, is just a regular members gathering that is just an opportunity for families or individuals to come together. For kids, we'll have a little bit of entertainment. We'll have food provided, hopefully through sponsorships. Just a chance to peer-to-peer to network with each other. And on our bigger goal is to take that to the various regions in the province and do the same thing, sort of replicate what we have in the Lower Mainland, but also in the Okanagan, the Kootenays, up north, on the island, because our members, the 10,000 people with CP, they're not all in the Lower Mainland. So that peer support is really critical. And if we can't get on the road, if you will, we do see social media through our Facebook chats, through our, obviously, just information being shared, but potentially developing some virtual programs that, maybe we can't get yoga in Kelowna, but maybe we can get adapted yoga virtually for them to do in their own home.
To come together. And with the peer support, one of our first programs was Dance Without Limits, a movement program for children with cerebral palsy. Well, when the kids were having their dance class, the parents were all meeting and greeting. And we discovered that they became their own informal group of support. So they were forming play dates outside of the class. They were conferring with each other and looking forward every week to get together and say, well, how did you handle this? Where did you find that? And it just was a completely organic support group, because these people with similar lived experience were together each week, sort of same bat time, same bat channel. And the supports just grew organically.
Yeah, it's got to be great to see when that community starts to pull together.
Yes, I mean, you can't create a community. All you can do is set the occasion and give people the opportunity, and then it'll grow.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I'm newer, 6 months into this position. I'm not new into the social service or nonprofit world, and so I've learned a lot. But one of the first things we're doing in October is the first ever just members gathering, and a couple people said to me, I don't think many people are going to come. And we had our AGM the other night, and they're like, oh, well, thanks for doing this. We can't wait. Thanks for doing something that provides something for my kids to do, and me to just sit there and chat with my, the other mom over there. So I just see this, I don't care if two people came at first, we're just going to keep at it and keep growing it and keep providing support for people that need it. But we're going to see 30 plus people at this first gathering, and that's just, wow, let's try it and see if it works, right? And that needs to happen in the various regions around the province. People are very isolated.
Yeah, and I think isolation really is the biggest bugbear with disability. I mean, it's a social determinant of as many ills as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day or morbid obesity. So,
really? Wow,
yes,
that's a large impact.
It is. It is, and it's very, very prevalent, especially when you have mobility issues, but also depression, a lot of barriers to participation.
And then you have, one of my earliest conversations interviewing a parent who has a son with CP, she says, do you realize how difficult it is? As soon as it rains, we really can't go out. If we didn't get sponsored for our $75,000, converted vehicle, we couldn't go on the roads or take a for anything. As soon as an elevator's down at the Canalide station, which it is every day lately, they can't use transit. Just the challenges, right? And accessible restaurants. We've just put up a list on our website. They can't wait in line, or just can't go sit up at the bar waiting for their table. There's a lot there that we don't think about until you really get to know somebody with lived experience.
Just buses who, because they're packed, leave a person in a wheelchair at the bus stop and keep going in the snow. That's a story we hear commonly.
Yeah.
Are there other like organizations in other provinces, and do you guys ever sort of work with them or collaborate at all?
Yes. In fact, there's just a newly revived CP Canada network, and it received a federal government grant to determine if we needed a national structure to this all, and be some sort of national fundraising campaign. I mean, so many other groups have those, which I would be fully in support of, that there is something that is, a model that can be brought into each community. There's also, in varying degrees, other provincial organizations. Alberta is one of the larger ones. And then in some of the provinces, they're volunteer-led, or they're just trying to get going again. I just think, for my short term, I just feel like there's a renewed desire, if you will, or a renewed call for putting CP out there in the forefront. It's not a disability that has received enough attention or support.
And why do you think that is? Do you think it's just because it's so poorly understood?
I think there's a lot of things, and it depends who you talk to and the interpretation. Is 10,000 people enough people to really be concerned about versus 500,000 people with another condition? Have the voices been loud enough? Just misunderstood what's actually needed. So I think there just needs to be an incredible strategic effort on awareness building. And that's not just, by our organization, that's by mobilizing the members in our province, as well, to speak about cerebral palsy.
Yeah. Other conditions have, through the Supreme Court, have required funding be made available, so you get a concentration of funding that pulls away. It's a limited resource situation, so you lose out on that. Now, cerebral palsy and autism are very often comorbid conditions, and it just really depends on which is presented first, what diagnosis a person carries. But the MS Ice Cube Challenge, if you remember, that taunted me because we have similar numbers. And that summer, it was gaining so much attention. Celebrities, politicians were all taking the Ice Cube Challenge. But MS is something that, or ALS, I guess it was, wasn't it? I may have the wrong one. I'm sorry. Yes, ALS. Well, ALS is something that most walking adults fear. Most people aren't really aware of cerebral palsy unless they are planning their family, and then it may not be their first consideration either. So just what is the likelihood of this affecting me? is a question that affects all of this.
So I want to just talk real quick again a little bit about your funding.
So there are various grants available. So I'll go back to saying we have no predictable funding, meaning each year we know that X is coming from this source. So it's a bit of a puzzle every year, which is a hard way to run an organization, but many businesses do it that way as well. So we are eligible to apply for grants. We are eligible to apply through some foundations. We, at times, have been successful in getting gaming funds from the province, although the parameters around those funds have changed. We've run special events. We have one wonderful third-party event put on for us by the TMX stock group, do a golf tournament, and we're one of 2 charities that are recipients of the funds from that golf tournament. If more third-party events could happen on behalf of Cerebral Palsy, it would be wonderful. We did run the clothing bin program, but when all the issues started to happen with that and the bins were shut down, at one point that was a significant stream of income for our organization. But we're going to try. We're not giving up. We've got our Light It Up Green campaign through the CanadaHelps.org website, and then you just search Cerebral Palsy, and it takes you right there. There's an option to donate $10, $50, $100. There's no amount that isn't helpful in our organization. Reaching out to those with CP to help fund is very difficult. These are some of the most vulnerable people in our province. So there's many others out there who can help. We just need to get that message out. We'd love to develop some corporate partnerships, something that fits with the company's mission as to why they would support an organization who are supporting people with CP. So that's on our agenda as we move forward.
Now, what about volunteers?
Well, we have a volunteer board of directors. We just had our AGM. We have eight volunteers. We have a volunteer advisory committee, which predominantly, represents the medical community. We have volunteers who come and help us do some of the work in the office. If we were to put on a special event, we have volunteers who will come and help do that. And many of those volunteers have CP themselves. So we try to provide opportunities for our own community to get involved.
And also with some of our programs like Dance Without Limits, adapted yoga, often students come to help the participant with the accessibility throughout those. And
when, a lot of times with corporate partnerships, checks might not be able to be written, but professional expertise in a particular area might be able to be given, assistance in writing a strategic plan or a communications plan or lending out of a communications staff. Like, there's all sorts of opportunities to provide support that aren't necessarily financial support. But if we were to do those things ourselves, they're at an expense.
Okay, well, maybe one more time before we let you go, can you give us a website where people can go to sort of find the most information?
www.bccerebralpalsy.com. All one word.
Perfect. Okay, guys, listen, can't thank you enough for taking some time out of your day and joining us and talking about this. Best of luck with the campaign.
Thank you. I just would like to give you an email address as well. I gave you the website, but if people have any questions or need information, particularly if they have CP, info@bccerebralpalsy.com.
We really appreciate this.
This is terrific. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Have a great day.
Thank you as well.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Wow. Well, that's interesting. I do feel like CP is one of those, it's not really in the psyche of a lot of people in terms of, the first thing that they think of when they think of disability. I think a lot of people, certainly the CNIB and the blindness organizations have done really good work in sort of bringing their plight into the forefront. But, I feel like CP, it really hasn't.
Well, I think part of the problem is that the effects of CP on any given person are pretty variable. So you can have people who, like she was saying, could be, walking with a bit of a limp and slurring their words. And it could go all the way to somebody who's, in a power chair, nonverbal, needing fairly constant care. There's a big spectrum in there, and I don't think people have really been educated about, CP, its effects, and the variability of it. So, there's a ways to go. There's a lot of education that needs to happen, it's a tough hill for them to climb.
Well, absolutely. It sounds like funding is really dire. I mean, they really need the funding, because you look at the numbers, and $1.5 million needed to raise a child with CP. I mean,
yeah, and it is. I mean, I was really surprised to hear that there was no provincial funding, because a lot of other organizations, the Deaf Blind Association, they get regular funding. Vision Services gets regular funding now, although I don't think they always did. But there's an unaddressed need there that government really needs to take a look at, and hopefully they will.
Again, it's an important agency, and we encourage anybody to go to the website and do whatever you can to help out. Hey, Ryan.
Rob.
Where can people find us?
They can find us online at www.atbanter.com.
They can also drop us an email if they so desire. The cowbell at shit, I lost it now.
Yeah, I should have sat over in that corner today and hit the cowbell.
Try that again. Cowbell at atbanter.com. Where else can they find us?
Oh, well, let me tell you, they can find us on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, and, believe it or not, LinkedIn.
Hey, that's what I hear. Brilliant. So that is going to about do it for us this week. Thanks, everybody, for listening in, and we'll see everybody next week.
This podcast has been brought to you by Canadian Assistive Technology, providing low vision and blindness solutions across Canada. Find us online at www.canasstech.com. That's CANASSTECH.com, or call us toll free at 1-844-795-8324. For all your assistive technology servicing needs, call Chaos Technical Services at 778-847-6840, or find them online at chaostechnicalservices.com.
Whoa, look at that. Master of the one take.